Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
We're getting a lot of questions answered today. I've always wondered about these, and I guarantee you have as well. Do opposites attract in relationships? The law of attraction, what is that? Why does one person find another person attractive or they gravitate toward them? And then why do some people look at somebody and say, man, that one's not for me? We're going to go deep into that. He's a men's transformational coach. I do believe a lot of the principles we're talking about here applies to pretty much anybody. And he's our professional of the year. Joshua Long is back with us. How's everything going with you?
He's going great, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great having you back here. So let's pick up where we left off last time we got together.
Yeah. So for new viewers, people go back, watch the last episode because this is going to stem a lot of like core energies. And what I call just a basic, simple tool to understand your own core energy as well as the opposing core energy, because it's going to play a lot into the law of attraction. And like Steve had mentioned, it's the dynamic of relationships. I know primarily, I say the universal emotion that we all feel is a sense of loneliness. So this really, a lot of people are always wanting to find love, putting so much pressure on romantic relationships. But we'll kind of go through the how they work in terms of like your relationships with your jobs, friends, and even family. Because I firmly believe, once you, in my evolution, I've kind of stepped out of the physical and everything kind of becomes, everything's energy. We all know this.
Mm-hmm.
Not very many people have ever disputed that everything is energy. But when you really surrender to that energy, you realize that's the higher dimension of us. So we're on the lower dimension here in 3D. And then you can start to, once you learn these tools, you can start to see through the physical world, which most would say stepping out of the matrix, and going into that 5D. So it really, when we go to core energies, and like we said, core energies, core feminine isn't defined to women. There's men that are in, core feminine energy, and there's women that are in core masculine energies. So we'll start with the romantic relationships, because this is kind of the unconscious law of attraction. And most of us are very familiar in tune with the romantic relationships and how when we meet somebody, there's what we call the spark, and a lot of people are looking for that spark. Now there's a good and bad to this spark. If you're following this spark, because you'll hear a lot of professionals in the energy world, like if you feel that spark, run. It's an indicator that it's not going to work out. But on the contrary, I would say yes, that's true when it comes to living in your subconscious life, in your false self and in your ego. If both of you are showing up in ego and running into that spark, eventually, yeah, it's going to conflict. But if you're both conscious and able and willing to put it all out there, you've worked, like we've talked, you worked through your pride, the shame, and the open communication has really happened. That spark is actually the best thing. You're going to get the most evolution out of that spark. But you got to know how to approach that spark. Because we spoke last week on how we get to the point of projection and envy in a relationship once you kind of get that comfort. Because then we're starting to project. So say like I'm a core feminine man. I attract core masculines. And the reason is, so when I say core, it's kind of like my yin and yang. We all know we're masculine, feminine. If I say core energy, it's because I have an abundance in my core feminine. So that's kind of my second nature operating place. The answer to that, so there's an abundance on this side, so there's a shortage on this side. So I'm abundant in feminine, short in masculine. But the answer to me finding my own personal, and yes, I believe you can do a lot of this healing on your own, but a romantic relationship is going to take you to that next level, because it's going to mirror back all that you need to evolve in. And instead of letting that envy and everything take over, you can actually receive it. And that's learning these core energies and where it really is beneficial, because you can start taking things without defense. So you can start to understand your partner. You can start to appreciate your partner. You can start to have compassion for your partner instead of that jealousy, that envy, that misery likes company.
And that's
Because
what we identified last time. I definitely need to watch the last time we got together. But example that first came to my mind is somebody who's a little bit of a introvert paired up with somebody who's an extrovert. The introvert looks at the extrovert and like, wow, I wish that was me. But then there's a point where envy and jealousy comes in, because the extrovert is hanging out with a lot of people, having a lot of great time, and the introvert's over here in the relationship, kind of leaning back a little bit. They hang together, but there's jealousy that can come out of that. I have a question.
yeah,
Do you feel that the more you learn about yourself, the more you do the work, the more you identify where your traumas are in your past, the more you filter when you meet people? Like, for example, if you haven't done any work, you're out there just, you go to a concert, event, or whatever, and you could just talk to anybody. It's like, wow, that they're hot. Wow, I'm into them. But the more you work on yourself, you have a filter where it's just like, no, that's not going to work. Put that over there. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Great talking to you. No, that's not going to work. Yeah. Put that over there. Does that make sense?
yeah, it totally makes sense. I definitely think because it's that in our world, we say it's opening the third eye, you know,
Okay.
to like the kind of just knowing that trusting and that intuition and
100%.
learning yourself. And we know the phrase, everything starts with you. You got to love yourself first. And when you really do that internally, and I always tell people because people's like, well, how do you know? Because we all can say, like, even forgiveness, we can all say, I forgive them, I forgive them, I forgive them. But there's a difference between saying I actually forgive someone and that energetic shift. But you really can't even, in my experience, you can't truly forgive someone from your trauma until you've forgiven yourself for how you showed up from that trauma. So you really have to find that within yourself, admit to that, get through that pride, that shame, and then you see how you've been showing up. Because most of the time, your authentic higher self, the intention was never to show up like that.
Yeah.
And once it really lands and you accept that you have shown up in a way that you don't want to, kind of like you become what you try not to be. And that's a lot of us.
What if somebody says, and let's assume they've done the work,
Mm,
they've done a substantial amount, they've kind of figured themselves out a little bit more, a lot of the principles that we're talking about, they feel that they love themselves. I had this conversation last night. I was at an event, and this came up. I had a conversation, and this person said, I'd just rather be alone at this point because I
mm,
meet this person. They had that issue, this person, that issue. Um, is it to the point where faster, like the third eye is open, and you can read it, you can spot BS right away? It's like this person is not right for me, that one is not. It's almost as if you're your own parents. And what would your mom do? Yeah, that one's not right for you, that kind of thing. It's almost like you're doing it to yourself, like, yeah, no, not that one, not that one. I see it happening more and more. I feel it even within myself, like, regardless of whether it's a romantic potential relationship or just a business relationship, right away it's like, nah, that one's not. No, this could be good, but
mm.
you know it way sooner. Do you find that in yourself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm,
And I mean, I do believe that we can't, I mean, I'm not saying that we have to be single. I think instinctively, we're here to coexist. I don't
sure.
think it has to be in romantic relationships, but just being open. If someone is like you just said, verbalizing that out, like, oh no, I'm fine with that to me feels like that's still you're in the ego. That's still coming from a place of fear. Because even in that statement, like what I heard you say, not that you said it, but how you said it, you're pulling, even how you said it, you're pulling in past relationships. So you're never actually allowing that person in front of you to be a clean slate in who they are, because that ego's in a place of fear. And it's got to a point of that's the pride statement that we talked about with pride. The pride statement is, I'm fine by myself. I'm fine by myself, and not that it can't be authentic, but that third eye tells you
Mm-hmm.
is an authentic statement, or you can feel the energy attached to the statement and whether it's authentic or it's actually, no, this is just a new part of you to protect yourself.
This person that said that last night, um, I believe you are correct in that she's taking on past traumas.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where that statement is coming up. She's also a comedian and she does shows. And I honestly think, and she's wonderful, but I think she hides behind her comedy. You know, she's it's her true self is not coming out. It comes out in funny stuff from time to time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Comedy. I mean, most of our personality traits, it's a why. And
Yeah.
I always say there's great things that come from trauma, but find the balance in them.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
'Cause I'm a people pleaser,
Same.
I'm recovered from that. But there was
Same.
a people pleasing that was like inauthentic out of fear and protection. And there's a like genuine kindness when you find the balance to it.
Right.
So yeah, so when we go back to that dynamic of that law of attraction, so like boundaries, we've talked and most people are familiar with boundaries. If you think of romantic relationships and you go into it, so you have that anxious, which kind of usually goes with that outgoing, outward, and then you have that introvert, which usually comes with the avoidant, which is the imbalanced masculine, feminine. But if you look at it, it's like as a core feminine energy, I may not have the strengths because I'm abundant in that. So I don't have boundaries. So that's why I'm very outward. I'm very outgoing. And you really find in this process too, as you awaken your own energy and balance yourself. I always said I was outgoing. Now that I'm more balanced, I realize no, I was outgoing because I was trying to fill myself up. And now that I've filled myself up, I'm actually not outgoing. I'm
Hmm.
kind of balanced. It kind of becomes choice. So where the core feminine has kind of no boundaries, the core masculine has too strong of boundaries. That's where that imbalanced masculine that you always say they're rude, they're arrogant, they always got to be difficult. It's because their boundaries are so strong. So that's kind of that law of attraction that brought them together because I'm abundant in not having boundaries. They're abundant in having too much. So what they need from me, I am the answer to their balance. I need to show them that they can trust some, understand that, yeah, you may be let down by people, but I'm to bring in love, soften them to where they're here to show me, oh, I need to stand up for myself and be able to speak my truth and have more boundaries. So that's where the two come together. So that's the romantic dynamic. But like you said, the outgoing part, it's opposite. You know, my partner used to just sit on the couch and have no worries in the world, but I would cause an argument about it. But realistically, my soul wanted to just relax, but I didn't know how to relax. So I had to cause
Hmm.
an argument about like, you gotta get up, you gotta do something, you gotta do all that. And not that they needed to find their balance, they did. Um, but it's neither one side's better than the other. And I feel like in our society, we're pointing the finger at each other, the masculine, the feminine, or the woman versus the man, the toxic, the narcissism, the toxic masculinity. But there's the imbalanced feminine core energy is also victim. So they're stuck in finger pointing. So there's a big pill they need to swallow that they're just as stuck as them because you're only going to meet what's on your frequency. So what you draw in is a mirror image of yourself. And that's why we're what we call the oneness of all of us and why nothing happens for no reason. There's a less life happens for us, not to us. What's the lesson? So
Hmm.
that's kind of like the dynamic of the opposites attracting. Now, if you get into a romantic relationship and you feel like, you go on a couple dates and you give it an opportunity and you say, oh, that, you just feel like a friend. That's because you're most likely the same core energy. So it's the unspoken universal. No, you're so similar, just like that's my buddy. So most friendships are going to be the same core energy.
And you said a moment ago that we project that and we get it back. So we ask for it. whether intentionally or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Your soul wants to evolve. I mean, your soul contract, you came here to grow, to learn lessons from the higher dimension. You came here. But your true self gets hijacked by the ego in the 3D because this is the land of 3D. This is the land of fear, shame, what I call it hell on earth. We're living in Satan society,
Yeah.
but we got to remember that we come from God, which is a higher dimension. Satan was kicked out of heaven, he's down here and we're in his field. Once he has your identity, you're taken. And children, 5 or 6, are the most vulnerable, easy to take over. And we're living in a world of fear. It's an egoic world in 3D.
Do you feel that people in relationships come together to teach each other something? It's always that. It's you got something I need to learn, I got something you need to learn, and then that's why two people come together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe it's subconscious.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that two core energies wouldn't try to make a relationship work. Most of the time in those kind of relationships, it's going to feel very boring. You're going to feel like there's no thrill, there's no excitement. It's because you're the same.
Mm.
You want to grow in that romantic field. But in the friend field, it's like, oh, we can have all the fun in the world. Well, that romantic kind of isn't there.
Yeah, it's not there. What happens over a period of time where a relationship kind of starts, I don't want to say get boring, but just spark isn't there. People evolve differently. I feel it's every 5 or so years. What's going on there? Two people met and things were cool. Maybe they started a life together, blah, blah, blah. Now you fast forward 10, 15 years later. One is looking for something else, and it doesn't seem to be working anymore. Why does that happen?
I would say that really is primarily because I think in the beginning there was that spark. I think there is that opposite. But the biggest thing is
Mm.
this is why this tool right here is the key. It's work. It's the key to understanding. You have to understand your partner, you have to understand yourself, and you have to have love and compassion. But I think in those relationships, usually families get started, kids get started. But if you're not conscious, and for so many years it was fun and exciting, and then you went through the like, yeah, we had a rough patch, you get to a point where you just shut down. It's like a total numbness and suppression of oneself, but it's almost like we're so far in it, we just go with it.
Right.
And then some people want to eventually get the divorce and separate, some people don't. um but I think it's that numbness. It's like I've tried, both parties are like, I've tried, or in their mind what they think they've tried from their projected reality. um but that will never work. If
And maybe it's a suppression because they have come to the realization that, oh crap, if we confront this, we're done. So now it's just like, yeah, no, just keep it as it is, keep it as it is.
right.
But we all have the answer inside of us, no matter what it is. That's my belief. Whatever you need an answer, you already know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh
just
yeah,
you listen to it.
knowing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that higher self that will speak to you. Yeah, and it's really sad because like now that like this core energy information, it's like I would love to just sit down because this is the key to like compassion and love is the answer. And that when you have compassion and love, that opens up what true communication is. I don't think people really know how to communicate. Like it's more than people think communicating is just like speaking what you think your truth is and saying it kind of has to be my way. And that's not how it works. Communication and compromise go very hand in hand. You got to let go and surrender false ego self, and be able to communicate and admit those things. And that's what goes back to all starting with ourselves.
Well, it's a difference, I believe, going deep in your communication or the surface communication. And some relationships go on for years and it's just based on the surface stuff. The deep stuff down and below never comes out. And
Mhm.
eventually, I got to imagine if that's who you are, then you don't feel fulfilled. I got more in here, and it's not it. Either I bring it out to the relationship or I don't. It's going nowhere. It's not going to happen anyway. And then you just feel like something's missing, and this is not the right place for you.
Right. Well, and the partner has to be in the same place. That's the thing. But then
Mm,
also fear from past things by if I ever do speak my truth or speak how I feel, no one's ever cared.
right.
You're already carrying that into a new relationship of not opening up and being vulnerable because vulnerability is key too. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the opposites. The most complicated relationship, I mean, so the friends relationship, because you're all the same, that's kind of where you're like, oh, I have so many friends. Like, I don't need, you'll kind of use that as a pride statement of like saying, I don't need the relationship, a romantic. The romantic is there to push you even further in your evolution. But then when you get, and those are kind of chosen relationships, then the joy of it all, and this is where, once again, this information is very, very potent, is family dynamics and coworkers. There's no, you kind of don't, or what we feel like we don't have control, you know? That's why like daddies and little girls go together. They're opposite energies. Mommies and little boys, they're opposite energies. So they kind of attract to each other, that law of attraction again in that dynamic. But when you're faced with like these opposite energies in family, we have the belief like they're family. How do I deal with them? Because if you're not on the same page, you're going to just butt heads. It's going to be button heads, and that's the
Yep.
family. Then you have the coworkers. You might have the boss that's an imbalanced masculine, and you're the imbalanced feminine, and you're just pleasing and pleasing the boss, you know? Um, and then that,
Mm,
how do you get out of that? You know, because those
yeah.
dynamics don't get to choose,
Those like that's the chosen relationships. You don't have a choice.
right?
Like you don't have a choice. You can't pick your family. You can pick your friends. In those situations, like what do you do? I mean, it's you got
Yeah.
to deal. Somehow you got to deal.
Yeah. And we just submit to it, you know?
Right, right.
And that's really nothing will ever change unless that one that's pleasing the boss, that's just kind of a false belief in society that just because you're an employee and someone's over you and they're masculine and you're a feminine, set your boundaries with your boss because accountability is the best form of love. But until we understand that these titles do nothing, you got to understand I can set a boundary with my boss, and that's pulling in your masculine energy to do that. And that's it gets, but learning this information allows you to not take offense to it. So learn who you are, learn your opposite energy. So the next time someone's acting like that, I don't take it personal. I'm actually opening my heart because I understand that their past life and their traumas have led them to where they are, the same way that I'm here where I'm at, even though we're showing up in two opposite behaviors. And I don't take it personally.
What we talked about last time we got together, is that the identification of the masculine, feminine energy within us?
Yeah.
Right? Like it was a series of questions,
Mm-hmm.
which is on your website.
This is on my website. Yep, there's a
Mm,
small quiz you can go and
yeah.
look at the list of imbalanced and balanced energies, core energies.
That was very powerful, which gets us to where we are today here in this discussion. But some of those questions, like, wow, like it was an eye opener. Like it made me think, like, oh, wow. There's no bad, there's no good. Sometimes when you first started reading the questions, um, I was like, oh my God, I'm skewed all the way over to this side. But then, once you see both sides, an eye opener. That's all I'm going to say. Very much an eye opener. But this is what you do. This is how you help, especially men, move their life forward and identify what's going on in their lives. So important, so impactful. This is like the blueprint. This is the secret sauce for your life, really what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's the simplest but hardest thing,
it is. Yeah,
paradox of life,
it is.
simple
It
but
is.
hard.
What's your website, Joshua?
Yeah, you can find me at www.joshualongcoaching, JOSHUALONG coaching.com. You can also find me on all social platforms at Coach Joshua Long, or you can just send me a direct email at transformation@joshualongcoaching.com.
Always awesome talking with you. Learn so much. And if I'm not learning it, you're validating things that I thought, which is pretty much the same thing and super cool. Thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve.
Appreciate it.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.